30 years of the incredible Ford GT90. Why did Clarkson call it proof that heaven exists on Earth? The modern Mustang Shelby GT 500, with its 771 horsepower supercharged V8, is the most powerful road-going Ford in history, and yet it has no true successor with the new generation. But does anyone remember that Ford unveiled a car of similar power 30 years ago, back in January 1995? Likely only die-hard car enthusiasts will answer yes, especially those who played Need for Speed 2 in the late 90s and already asked, why isn't the futuristic Ford GT90 show car in production? In the mid-90s, Ford's US lineup didn't exactly scream performance. Shoppers had no trouble finding a body-on-frame SUV, a pickup, a small front-wheel drive sedan, or a massive rear-drive land yacht. But fans of fast cars had fewer options. The most exciting offering was the lightweight track-focused Mustang SVT Cobra R with a 5.8-liter Windsor 5.8 pushing 300 horsepower. But there were two major issues. One, only 250 units were made, and two, they were only sold to licensed race drivers. That's why the impact of the GT90, a mid-engine concept that debuted at the 1995 Detroit Auto Show, was so powerful. It was a spiritual successor to the legendary Le Mans-winning GT40, and it looked like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. Even the first Ferrari SUV didn't cause half the media storm that the GT90 did. After all, who's shocked by a crossover these days? But a brutally powerful, seemingly illegal speed machine from the maker of the humble Escort. Now that was shocking. The first logical question was, why build it? Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear once asked that very thing to engineer Fred Goodnow, essentially saying, supercars are a European thing. You Americans just drive in a straight line, slap solid rear axles on your two doors, and don't understand handling. Goodnow's reply, we wanted to prove we could build the best car, and they did. After driving the GT90, Clarkson called it proof that heaven exists on Earth. High praise from the master of sarcasm. You might think it took ages to bring such a vision to life. Not at all. Another shocking fact, the GT90 was developed in just about 6 months by Ford's Special Vehicle Operations team, led by John Coletti. Why so fast? Because Ford owned Jaguar cars at the time and had access to their bonkers XJ220 Super Coupe. The GT90 inherited the XJ220's aluminum monocoque chassis and reworked double wishbone suspension components. The wheelbase was stretched by 12 inches to 116 inches, 2,946 millimeters. A proper supercar couldn't rely on a pushrod V8 with 2 valves per cylinder. For this monster, engineers developed a 5.9-liter V12 with a 90-degree bank angle, the first of its kind since the Lincoln Zephyr 512 of the 1930s and 40s. According to engine specialist Bob Natkin, the project began in secret within the Advanced Powertrain division. The idea was to further develop the modular engine concept, he said, referring to the 4.6-liter 32-valve modular V8 as a starting point. They cut 2 cylinders off 2 V8s, welded them together, and created a hybrid engine that made about 400 horsepower, which they then bizarrely installed into a giant Lincoln Town car for testing. In early 1994, John Coletti learned about the prototype and grabbed it for the upcoming concept car. But 400 horsepower wasn't enough. They needed at least 600. So inspired by Soviet turbocharging guru Amyek Akopyan's motto, "You've got to blow into it or no miracle will happen," engineer Ron DeVirgilio built a quad-turbo system using 4 Garrett T2 turbos and 2 intercoolers. Likely inspired by the Bugatti EB110, the result was beyond expectations. The American upstart outgunned the European elite. The dyno numbers must have felt like winning a championship. 730 horsepower and 895 newton meters, 660 pound-feet, of torque. By comparison, the EB110 Supersport had just 612 horsepower. The V12 ran so hot that the engine bay had to be lined with ceramic heat shields like those used on space shuttles. The transmission, developed by FF Developments and Ricardo, was a 5-speed manual. Rear-wheel drive only. The GT90 had little in common with traditional American cars. Its performance was off the charts. 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.1 seconds, 0 to 100 miles per hour in 6.2 seconds, and a top speed of 253 miles per hour, 407 kilometers per hour. Even an all-wheel drive Bugatti pilot might be impressed. Wrap this chassis in plywood and cover it with leaves, and people would still applaud. The numbers alone command awe. But the GT90 earned bonus points for debuting Ford's radical, new-edge design language, which would later influence production models. Sharp triangular forms gave the car a stealth bomber look. Not only Clarkson, but also Motor Trend's John McCormick got to test the forbidden fruit. He said the GT90 wasn't attractive, but rather off-putting, with its hunchback silhouette and strange blend of flat planes and triangle shapes. The car's insane power both intrigued and terrified. How do you handle a raw, unfinished chassis? What if I crashed this one-off prototype just weeks before its debut in Frankfurt and Tokyo? The revelations began right at the door. Literally, the sills were surprisingly narrow and low, nothing like the obstacle courses on a Lamborghini Diablo. Inside, the GT90 felt far more spacious than any rival. No bulky central tunnel, and the open shifter mechanism was visible in all its glory. At idle, the unrefined engine ran a bit rough. Its muffled tone inside the cabin sounded more Porsche 911 than Ferrari 512 TR. The clutch pedal was heavy, but the polished gear lever engaged first gear with the precision of a well-oiled mechanism. Getting going smoothly required a generous stab of the throttle. The tachometer wasn't working, but I think I was shifting at around 3,000 RPM. Felt underwhelming, but I was still getting used to the car. The gearbox from the XJ220 shifted fairly easily. Gaining confidence, I revved it to the 5,900 RPM redline. As revs rose, the V12 gave off a haunting wail. A loud jet-like whistle floated over the top, which Goodnow said came from the four turbos. But with wastegates locked open, the engine was essentially naturally aspirated. Goodnow wasn't willing to stress the fragile body with full power. So in my hands, the GT90 only made around 400 horsepower in torque. Still impressive, but acceleration didn't have the punch I expected. Up to 70 miles per hour, it felt fast but not dramatic. Turns out the Jaguar gear ratios were too tall for the much heavier Ford, McCormick recalled. Although the journalist was given a detuned version, he admitted that the 3.1-second sprint to 60 miles per hour didn't quite make sense to him. Nothing stopped him from evaluating the handling. With the power steering pump disabled, turning the front Goodyear Eagle tires, 275/35ZR18, was no easy task. Nevertheless, the Ford responded quickly and precisely to moderate steering inputs. Goodnow had forbidden aggressive maneuvers. The 13-inch AP brake discs slowed the concept car with fury. Forward visibility was excellent, while rearward visibility was about as good as in a Lotus Esprit, meaning virtually non-existent. Side visibility wasn't great either. The angular beltline robbed the driver of some visual information. The tiny rearview mirrors were useless, though each one did have a warning light for objects in the blind spot. Few people saw the show car after its Detroit debut. It made an appearance at the Woodward Dream Cruise in 2002, attended the Goodwood Festival of Speed in 2008, and was shown again the following year at the 45th anniversary celebration of the Mustang. The GT90 was slated for auction at RM Sotheby's in 2010, but was eventually pulled. Its new owner became Brent Hodgek, an oil and gas magnate and the owner of the Hodgek Motorsports Museum in Oklahoma. I first discovered the car in 2003 during Ford's centennial celebration. The company selected 8 or 9 of my cars to be displayed at the event. We went on a tour in Dearborn, which included visiting a contractor's storage facility. That's where I spotted the GT90. I had practically forgotten it existed, but I inquired about buying it and then spent a few years closing the deal, Hodgek told Classic Driver. His status as a collector played a key role. He had long-standing relationships with many of Ford's key people, played a major part in organizing some of the brand's high-profile events, and was undoubtedly seen as the most fitting and deserving candidate to own the car. The GT90 found its new home in 2012. The price remains undisclosed. One wonders whether it was astronomical or, on the contrary, a symbolic friends and family deal they prefer not to reveal to avoid sparking envy. There was bad fuel in the tank, and both side windows were cracked at the top. Apparently, someone had tried pulling on them to open the doors. We had to manufacture new ones for $18,000. Nothing else was needed. We filled it with fresh gas, and the Ford started up immediately. It even came with spare tires, wheels, and all the documentation relating to its build and history, Hajek explained. It seems this museum piece is still ready to roar, though the world would surely have welcomed it more as a limited production model. According to Fred Goodnow, a fully competitive supercar would certainly have emerged had the company given it a 2 to 3 year development program. This may be the smartest and most thrilling car ever made, Clarkson once said, rubbing salt in the wound for enthusiasts. The only way to experience the GT90 now is to go to Oklahoma or fire up a driving simulator. By the way, in the virtual world, it's in full power mode, complete with functioning wastegates.